The land near Edge Hollow never quite woke up in summer. The grass, browned early, crackled under hooves like brittle parchment, and the air held the weight of too many seasons gone wrong. August Thorne rode with his head down, not because he feared the sun, but because habit had taught him to look only at what needed mending: fence, feed bins, himself. It was the whisper that stopped him faint, like wet fabric pulled slow through gravel. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a place where silence had learned to settle deep. He pulled the reins. The mare snorted, restless, sensing something. August dismounted, boots crunching the dry moss at the edge of the stream. There, in the bend of the creek, where cottonwoods leaned like eavesdropping old men, lay a shape too still for comfort. Small, crumpled, drenched. He approached as if the ground might crack underfoot. It wasn't instinct. It was something slower. He had no room left for instincts. A girl. Couldn't be more than 9 or 10. Her dress was torn, clinging to her thin limbs like a second skin. Mud crusted her cheek, her lips pale blue. One arm wrapped tightly around something. August squinted. A silver hairpin. The other hand clutched a scrap of paper, so soaked it looked ready to dissolve. She wasn't unconscious. Her eyes were open, unfocused. The way a hunted animal stares past you instead of at you. He crouched behind her. Not too close. "You hurt?" he asked. The words came out rough, like they hadn't been used properly in months. No answer. Just a blink. Slow. The kind that cost effort. "You got a name again?" Nothing. But her fingers tightened around the pommel. August sat back on his heels. He should ride to town, get the deputy, report it proper. That's what men did when they found strange children near their land, especially when the world already looked at them sideways. But then the girl looked at him. Just once. A glance. So fleeting it could have been imagined. But in it was something older than any child should carry. Not fear. Not even pleading. Just the heavy, hollow ache of someone who'd been left too many times. He sighed, low and long. Then without another word, he lifted her gently, wrapped in the saddle blanket. She weighed less than she should have, less than memory. The mare stepped carefully, as if she, too, understood the silence. The cabin had waited 5 years for a reason to feel warm again. August had never given it one. Inside, the shadows clung to corners like cobwebs, dust on the mantel, books left untouched on Mabel's shelf, the stove-cold metal that hadn't held flame since the week they put her in the ground. He laid the girl on the bed. He hadn't entered since. Mabel's pillow still smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. The girl shivered. Her lips moved. But no sound came. Just breath and the trembling weight of whatever storm had brought her here. August hesitated, then feared. He stripped off her wet dress with careful, respectful hands, turned his eyes away, wrapped her in one of Mabel's flannel shirts. It swallowed her whole. The paper stayed clutched in her fist the whole time. He tried not to wonder what was written there. As night fell, he lit a fire, the first in years. Sparks snapped like old bones, and heat crept into the walls like memory. She slept restlessly, her brow damp, her feet tucked close like she didn't trust the floor. August sat in the rocking chair across the room, watching her through the flicker of flame. He didn't know what to do with the weight in his chest. It wasn't fear or pity. It was older than both, and lonelier. She moaned once, twisted beneath the blanket. Her voice came, hoarse and raw, barely above a whisper. "Don't let him find me." August didn't move, but something inside him did. Later, when the fire had settled into a steady glow, he stood, looked around the cabin that hadn't heard laughter in half a decade, that had learned to breathe quiet. He lit the stove again, heated water, made tea, though she wouldn't drink it. That night, while she slept, August sat in the dark and stared at the hairpin on the nightstand. A lily, Mabel's favorite flower. He didn't believe in signs, but he kept the fire going anyway. August woke before dawn, as he always did. But today, the house didn't feel like it belonged to him alone. The heat from the stove had softened the air, made it heavier in his lungs. He sat up slowly on the edge of his cot and listened. Silence, save for the wind outside. And then, faint, barely louder than a mouse's breath, the rustle of a blanket shifting. The girl was still there. He rose, joints stiff, and moved toward the small room that had once held Mabel's books. Her sewing kit. The creaky iron bed she insisted was sturdier than anything new. She'd died in that room. Quietly, without protest. Just a hand on his arm. And then nothing. He'd closed the door and never opened it again until yesterday. Now the girl lay curled up, small and still. One hand clutched the blanket at her chest. The other still held the soggy paper, now dry but crinkled like old bark. The silver hairpin rested on the nightstand, untouched. She was awake. He could tell. But she didn't move. Just watched him from under her lashes. The way a deer watches a hunter waiting to see if the next step means danger. "I got coffee," he said. She blinked once. That was it. He stepped away and lit the pot on the stove. The fire caught easier today. Funny, how something as simple as flame could change the shape of signs. He fixed oatmeal and left it on the table. After a while, she padded out barefoot. She didn't speak, just climbed onto the bench and stared at the bowl. "You can eat," he said gently. She picked up the spoon with two hands, like it might break. While she ate, August went to fetch water. When he came back, she was sitting on the floor, using a charcoal stub to draw in the dust. Lines, arcs. He leaned closer. Letters, clumsy but clear. Sylvie. "That your name?" She didn't nod, didn't look up, just kept drawing. Next, she sketched something that looked like a riverbank, a crooked tree, then a long shape, like a shadow with eyes. August stared at it longer than he meant to. His chest tightened. There was fear in the lines pressed dark, over and over, like she needed the charcoal to carry what she couldn't say. He let out a slow breath. "Sylvie." "Then," he murmured. "All right." Later that day, he hitched the mare and set out for town. He hadn't planned to take her, but she wouldn't let go of his coat when he tried to leave. No crying, no begging, just a grip like wire. So he helped her onto the wagon seat. She sat straight-backed, eyes darting, the way animals do when they've been chased too long. Edge Hollow wasn't much a general store, a blacksmith, a church with a bell that rang too late and too often. People watched them come in, like the wind had brought ghosts. At the mercantile, Mrs. Keever raised one painted eyebrow. "That your niece?" "Mr. Thorne," numbered August said. She waited for more. He didn't give it. He picked up soap, a comb, some dried apples. Sylvie followed quietly, never touching anything. As they left, a voice called out, sweet as poison in a teacup. "August Thorne," said Lucetta Vale, stepping from her porch with parasol in hand. "And who's this little shadow?" Sylvie froze. Lucetta's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Such a darling thing. But I thought your house was empty these days." August's jaw tightened. It was. Lucetta tilted her head. No wife to keep watch, dangerous times for little ones. Before August could answer, Deputy Ford stepped out from the sheriff's office, adjusting his belt. "You got papers for her, what?" Ford shrugged. "Wards, guardianship, orphanage release, anything." August shook his head. She's not a stray dog. No, Ford said, voice even. But it's still the law. Children without kin can't just be taken in, even by men with quiet reputations. Lucetta's smile sharpened, like a knife catching sunlight. I'll get the paperwork, August said, almost to himself. Ford tipped his hat. You do that. As they rode out, Sylvie trembled beside him, not fearfully, but like something was vibrating under her skin. Back home, she didn't eat much, didn't speak. But when August laid the blanket over her that night, she didn't flinch. He left the door open a crack. Later, when the fire had burned down low, he passed her room. She was asleep, hand curled around the trinket again. The charcoal drawing sat on the floor beside the bed, face down. August picked it up. More drawings, a barn, a woman's face, thin with hollow eyes. And in the corner, tiny and faint, a figure holding something that looked like fire. His hand shook slightly as he folded it. He hadn't meant to keep her, but he also hadn't meant to light the stove again. The storm had come and gone in the night, and by morning, the earth was soft, scattered with broken twigs and the sharp smell of wet dust. August was mending the south fence when the sound reached him, a thud. The cry of a horse, and something else, something human. He dropped the hammer and ran. She lay at the edge of the gully, her mare tangled in brambles nearby. Blood marked her temple, not heavy, but enough to pale her skin. Her dress, once fine, was torn at the hem, boots scuffed raw from the fall. She groaned, trying to sit. August stood above her, hands on his hips, unsure whether to help. What the hell, he muttered. The woman looked up, one eye squinting against the sun. Water, she rasped. August knelt, offered his canteen. She drank too fast and coughed. You ride alone? No, she said, breath catching. But I arrived that way. That wasn't an answer. But August had little taste for riddles. He helped her onto her feet, felt the weight of her lean frame, the strength behind it, not delicate, but worn. She looked like someone who used to be beautiful in the way cities remembered their churches, grand, distant, and hollow. My horse, I'll get her. Can you walk? She nodded, jaw set. Back at the cabin, Sylvie stood at the window. When she saw the woman limping beside August, her face darkened. She stepped back, vanishing from view. Clara saw her too. They didn't speak. August helped Clara into a chair, fetched a rag and whiskey for the cut. You live alone? She asked, voice flat. Used to. He said, is that your daughter or no? She's safe, he paused. She is now. Clara watched him for a long second, then reached into her satchel and pulled out a yellowed envelope. I'm Clara. Clara Vine. August raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I'm looking for something. Someone. Actually, he didn't reply. Clara's fingers tapped the envelope. Before the war, my sister worked at a place near here, Callan House for Girls. Burned down. 1872, you remember it? August shook his head. Wasn't my business. It was someone's business. He didn't like her tone. Too sharp for a stranger. And your sister Lorna Callan. She died the day the orphanage burned. Clara's eyes didn't blink. She was 60 months pregnant. August looked down at his hands, the skin cracked from weather and years. What does that have to do with the girl here? I don't know. Yet. She stood. A bit too fast. August caught her elbow without thinking. For a moment, their eyes locked. Neither of them liked what they saw. That evening, Sylvie wouldn't eat. She stared at Clara from behind the table leg like a coyote watching fire. When Clara tried to approach, Sylvie clutched her silver pin so hard her knuckles whitened. Clara froze. That trinket. she said slowly. Where'd she get it? August didn't answer. Clara knelt, lowering herself to Sylvie's eye level. That belonged to my sister. Sylvie's breath hitched. You knew her? August asked, voice quiet. I think, Clara said. I might have known her child. Sylvie bolted, leaving the room. Clara sat down hard on the floor, her hands trembling for the first time all day. August stood outside that night, the moon hanging low and yellow behind the ridge. The air was dry again, restless. He heard the door creak behind him. Clara joined him, wrapped in a borrowed shawl. You don't want me here, she said simply. He didn't deny it. She's terrified of you. I scare a lot of people. He glanced at her. I speak too plain. I ask too many questions. Men don't like it. Neither do their wives. You married us once. She shrugged. Didn't take. August nodded slowly. They stood there, quiet, until Clara broke it. You think I'm wrong to look no, he said. I think you want something you can't have. Clara exhaled, her breath curling in the cool. Still, she murmured, maybe I can name the ghosts. The next morning, she asked to stay. August didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, just until you can ride. He didn't ask where she planned to go. Sylvie avoided Clara, slipping between rooms like a shadow, but one evening, the girl left something on Clara's cot, a folded page from the stove's old ledger, smudged with soot, but clear enough to read. At the bottom, a name was written in a child's hand, M. Callan. Clara pressed the page to her chest and closed her eyes. Over the next days, Clara started digging. She rode to the Edge Hollow Records office, where dusty ledgers lay forgotten in boxed cases no one opened. She bribed a clerk with pie and bourbon. She copied names onto parchment, cross-checked dates, interviewed the blind preacher who once gave sermons at Callan House. Everywhere she turned, doors resisted, but Clara had never been good at turning away. She came back to the cabin one evening with mud on her boots and a spark in her eyes. I found something, she told August. He looked up from chopping wood. There's a page missing from the 1872 roster, she said, ripped clean out. But on the margin of the previous page, someone scribbled a note. LC transfer delayed. Reprimand logged. Infant not viable. August frowned. Infant not viable. She repeated. But someone logged it. Someone lied. Inside, Sylvie drew circles in ash by the hearth. Clara watched her. She's not just a runaway. Is she? August didn't answer. But in the silence between them, something shifted. She was no longer just a stranger on a horse, and he was no longer a man who lived alone. The first cold wind of fall slipped through the hollow that morning, rustling the yellowing leaves like warning whispers. August felt it in his knees, in the ache that came before weather turned mean. The girl had woken early and disappeared again, something she'd taken to doing lately, moving around the house like breath. Clara was already at the table, sleeves rolled up, papers spread like a crime scene she couldn't solve. August poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. He handed her one, then nodded toward the page she'd been studying all night. You find what you were looking for. Clara tapped the corner of a ledger page with her fingertip. I found what someone tried to bury. Sylvie had found it first, 2 days before. She'd crept into the front room while August was chopping wood. The old upright piano hadn't sung in years, but she'd been drawn to it, not for music, but because something inside it hummed when no one was listening. The keyhole had long since rusted over, but Sylvie, with fingers made for secrets, had found the trick. Behind the broken hammers, beneath the warped strings, was a hollow. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and dust, lay a ledger bound in cracked leather. She hadn't said anything, just carried it into her room and sat with it, silent for hours. It was August who found her that night, curled under the quilt, the book beneath her pillow, like a charm. She didn't speak, but she handed it to him, eyes wide, frightened. The ledger was marked May 1872. Inside were lists, rows of names, children, each with a number, a date, and beside some of them a red mark, a slash, a cross, a dot. The red ones all ended the same way, transferred or removed. Some were simply left blank. Clara studied each name, every notation, tracing letters with a kind of reverence. She pointed. That one. Elsie Wardy. She was supposed to go to Blackridge in August, but she never arrived. She flipped a page. This one. Jonah Tellis, marked unfit. Then gone. August leaned closer. How many are there? Too many. She exhaled, pushed back her hair. Her hands were trembling again. And here. She tapped the bottom of a page. LC. Noted disciplinary action taken. Infant not viable. My sister. Clara said. She tried to report it, this whole system of moving kids off books, selling some to ranchers. Others, gone without a trace. Her voice cracked. She was going to testify. Then the fire happened. August said nothing. The stove clicked as it cooled, sharp against the silence. He turned another page. His hand froze. There, in the margins, written in a different hand, Mabel's handwriting. Unmistakably hers was a short note. If one name matters, Mercy Hallow. The dream always ends there. August's breath caught. He'd heard that name once, in a dream he never told anyone. Mabel sitting by the hearth, whispering through the crackle of flame. Mercy never made it. But maybe she will next time. He'd woken crying. That was 2 winters ago. He touched the ink like it could still be warm. Later, Clara rode to town with the excuse of fetching supplies. August didn't question it. But as she passed the chapel's edge, she saw him and Deputy Ford, leaning against the rail post like he'd been waiting all morning. Miss Van, he called. Too polite. Clara slowed her horse, kept her face calm. Didn't expect to see you out this way again, he said. Just errands, she replied. Ford nodded toward her saddlebag. You always carry that much paper for apples and soap. She smiled thinly. I'm old-fashioned. Like to write lists. Ford stepped off the porch. Be careful digging into things that don't concern you. Is that a warning? He shrugged. Just advice. There's a difference. Clara held his gaze. You knew Lorna Callan, didn't you? He blinked. Not enough to be a tell, but enough to know she'd hit something close. She was a girl who got in trouble, he said finally. That's all. And Lucetta Vale. He smirked. That woman could run this town with a whisper. Clara leaned forward. She did more than whisper. Didn't she? Ford's eyes narrowed. Best go home now. Miss Van. Before folks start wondering why a stranger asks about old aces. That night, back at the cabin, Clara laid out the ledger under the lantern light. Sylvie sat cross-legged beside her, drawing softly in the soot on the floor. August watched from the doorway. The wind outside had teeth. You think they'll come? He asked. Clara looked up. Her face was tired, but resolute. If they think this ledger still exists, she said, they won't just come. They'll burn the rest of the forest to find it. Sylvie didn't speak, but she reached for Clara's hand, held it tight. And this time, Clara didn't pull away. The sun had almost burned its noon glare into the air by the time Clara heard hoofs on the driveway. She'd been hunched over the ledger, tracing letters by candlelight, replaying that burnt fire and the weight of her sister's memory. August was outside pacing, the same way he did when he carried too many questions in his chest. Then the gate creaked. Clara lifted her head. She saw Lucetta Vale dressed in crisp white linen, parasol unfurled though the sun barely touched her. She carried herself like someone born into power, as if Edge Hollow bowed to her footsteps. Lucetta paused on the porch, raising a pale hand in greeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thorne." "Miss Vand," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I hope I'm not interrupting." August stepped forward, his shoulders taut. "Not at all." Lucetta's gaze flicked to Clara. "You've been a busy visitor, Miss Vand." "I trust the hospitality is comfortable," Clara answered evenly. "It's adequate." Lucetta's lips quirked, as if tasting a secret. "Miss Thorne, I've heard rumors you've taken in this child. A noble sentiment, no doubt, but unconventional." August stiffened. "She's my responsibility now." "That child," Lucetta said, "is unregistered, unvouched for, a potential liability." She tapped the ledger Clara held in her arms, "especially if certain details are made public." Clara raised an eyebrow. Details like who covered for the Callan House cover-up, or who ensured some names were redacted. Lucetta's parasol trembled in her grasp. A sharp tension cut through the porch air. "You speak with too much certainty." Her voice dropped to silk again. "You accuse without proof." "Miss Van." Clara set the ledger on a low table, pouring every ounce of quiet strength into each step she took. "I'm asking for nothing more than the truth. My sister died in that fire under suspicious circumstances. Someone made sure her notes, her concern over children disappearing, were erased. I want us to stop burying it." Lucetta remained polite, but her eyes sharpened. "Your sister's tragedy was tragic, but your crusade has consequences. Look at your expression, your tone there incendiary. You're waking ghosts that hurt people." Oh, Clara moved closer. "So suppressing witnesses, ignoring names in red ink that hurts? Or is the hurt reserved for children who died voiceless?" Lucetta's posture changed subtly. Something brittle in her poise cracked. "You arrive like a storm, Miss Van, and storms kill. Not everything needs to be uprooted." Clara stared. Some roots rot in dark. The orphanage wasn't medicine for children. It was a warehouse for secrets. My sister tried to expose it. Lucetta tapped a manicured finger to her temple. "Your sister, the patriotic martyr. But she didn't survive. That's a warning, not an inspiration." Clara stiffened. "I'm not her. I'm not here to die for her memory. I'm here to live it, to finish what she started." August exhaled. He hadn't moved. He looked from Lucetta to Clara. "Torn." Lucetta's voice softened. "August, you're a practical man. You see consequences. Think what will happen to this child when you dig too deep." August opened his mouth, closed it. He swallowed. "She's safe," he said quietly. "For now." Lucetta batted her hand. "That's exactly my point. For now. But what about later? When people ask questions about your involvement, about that ledger?" That Clara cut in. "If you fear that ledger, I suggest you pass it along. It belongs with witnesses like myself. And August here." Lucetta's lips curved thin. "You presume so much." Clara shook her head. "No. I observe. You've been controlling records, steering conversations, making sure no name ever surfaces. Let me ask you, were you ever a little girl? Did you ever ride that shiftless horse? Clutch that hairpin? Hope someone would notice?" Lucetta's eyes sharpened. For the first time, she looked uncertain, undone. She took a step back. "You charm your way into pity, and then you reveal swords. How noble. How pathetic." Clara called after her as Lucetta turned. "Some people don't forgive, because if they did, They'd be forced to face what they destroyed. Lucetta paused at the gate, with one glance back. She whispered, "Some people are unredeemable," and walked away. Inside, the house was quiet. Sylvie sat at the table, ironed spoon in hand, reluctant to meet either of their gaze. August stood between them, the ledger flat as a grave on the table. He closed his eyes, sighed, arms heavy. "You both make compelling arguments." Clara looked up. "There's more to this ledger. Other names, other witnesses. I want to follow it. I want justice." August's voice cracked. "I'm caught between saving the world and saving my home, and I don't know which side to pick." Clara approached him softly. "Neither of us wants revenge. August, we want acknowledgement, closure." He swallowed. "I didn't bring her into this to start a battle." Clara glanced at Sylvie, asleep now in her chair. "You did bring her here to protect her, but staying silent invites others to exploit her story." He felt something shift in him, unspoken but undeniable. He touched Sylvie's small hand. "I haven't chosen perfectly." He looked at Clara. "But I won't let her go down in silence." Clara nodded, misting. "Then we start together." August turned to her. "What do you want us to do next?" Clara picked up the ledger with the same firm purpose that had carried her far. "We follow each red mark. We find people who remembered. We shine a light." He watched her, resolute, in his chest. Something unclenched outside. The wind rustled through the dry autumn leaves. The ledger lay open in candlelight, its red marks and crossed names illuminating a path forward. Sylvie slept, her breathing soft as embers. Above them, the stars watched. The wind that night had teeth gnawing through the trees, howling against the roof like a warning too late to heed. August lay awake on his cot, in the room that once held his wife's breath, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, ears sharp. Downstairs, the ledger still sat open, its pages a graveyard of names and whispers. Too many ghosts, too little peace. Clara had stayed up late in the front room, cross-referencing the names by the dim glow of a sputtering oil lamp. Sylvie lay curled on the sofa, fast asleep, beneath a threadbare flannel blanket. They'd locked the doors, bolted the windows, double-checked the guns. But precautions were no match for the kind of threat that doesn't knock. The first sound came like thunder, glass shattering, wood splintering. August was on his feet before the echo finished. Clara yelled from the parlor. Sylvie shot up, eyes wide in terror. "Go," August shouted, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. The sound ripped through the house like a war cry. Someone was inside. A figure lunged through the broken window, shadows swallowing his face. He moved like he knew the house. Clara scrambled back, shielding herself as books and ledgers went flying. August met the man mid-charge, grabbing him by the coat and slamming him into the wall. "Where's the ledger?" he growled. The intruder grunted, twisting free just long enough to throw a wild punch. August countered, driving a knee into the man's ribs. Another shot rang out closer. Clara had retrieved a pistol but missed. "Go after the girl," the intruder shouted to someone outside. Sylvie was already gone. Clara rushed toward the door, but August held her back. "Stay in seat." She hesitated, then nodded, locking it behind him as he tore out into the darkness. Sylvie had fled instinctively, barefoot and shaking, her legs barely keeping up with the fear that pushed them forward. She climbed the slope behind the house, slipping once, then again, until she reached the flat ridge above the trees. There, waiting in the dark, was Deputy 40. He stood still, like he'd been waiting. "Sylvie," he said gently, though the cold in his voice betrayed the tone. "You need to come with me." "No," she whispered. "I have legal guardianship papers. You don't belong here." She shook her head, tears welling. "You're lying." He stepped forward. "I'm not here to hurt you. But this is no place for a child." He reached for her arm. She flinched. And from behind, a voice cracked through the trees like lightning. "That's far enough." August appeared, revolver drawn. Steps sure and deliberate, his eyes were pure fire. Ford froze. "August, don't be reckless. You don't touch her. She's not yours to keep. She's not yours to take." August cocked the revolver. Last warning. Ford's hand hovered over his belt, then dropped. He backed away slowly. "You're making a mistake." August ignored him, kneeling before Sylvie. Her little hands trembled as she grabbed hold of his sleeve. "Don't leave me," she whispered. He swallowed. Never. Back at the house, Clara had fended off the second intruder's scratches on her arms. Papers scattered like feathers in the wake of a storm. But the ledger was gone. Stolen. August carried Sylvie inside, his arms around her like armor. Clara met them at the door, eyes sharp, already scanning for new locks. The girl didn't speak, but she didn't let go. Her trust was no longer fragile. It had roots now. August sat her gently by the hearth, wrapped her in a blanket. Clara found one torn page under the broken piano. She turned it slowly, gasping softly at the name scribbled there, Mercy Hollow. "It's not all gone," she said, voice thin but burning. August looked at Sylvie, then at Clara. "No," he said, "not yet." That night, none of them slept. They sat by the fire, backs to the walls, weapons close. Clara whispered a new plan. Sylvie sat between them, cross-clutched to her chest. No longer crying, just watching, learning, believing. August held the revolver across his knees. Outside, the wind eased, spent from its rage, but something stirred again in the distance. Creaks, then silence. 3 shadows, watching. They didn't come in, not this time, but they would again. Dawn crept over Edge Hollow with trembling fingers. The house bore its scars, broken glass, blood on the banister. Pages missing, but it stood. So did they. Clara had a bruise swelling over her cheek. August's hands were raw. Sylvie didn't speak. But when she looked at them, there was no fear left. Only fire. For them. Clara whispered. For all of them. August nodded. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The road east of Edge Hollow was more dust than path, choked by cottonwood roots and the stubborn memory of wagon wheels. August hadn't ridden that way in years, not since Mabel's passing. Now the trail seemed almost to resist them. Branches snagged at reins. Wheels hit unseen ruts, and the sun hung low, like it didn't care to rise further. Sylvie sat beside him, wrapped tight in her coat, her red marble clutched in one palm. Clara rode behind on her own mare, face hard as stone. No one spoke for miles. They were searching for a ghost. Past the abandoned mill and over a brittle creek. The trees thinned into a clearing. A shack stood crooked under the weight of its own roof. Smoke curled from a rusted pipe. Something alive still stirred here. "See in there?" Sylvie whispered. Clara nodded. "If he remembers anything, it'll be in there." August dismounted first. He knocked once on the door, and when no answer came, pushed it open. The inside smelled of old paper, pine sap, and something faintly sweet, dried berries perhaps. A fire crackled in a stone pit. Beside it, hunched like a bird with broken wings, sat a man, wrapped in a blanket the color of coal dust. His beard was wild, eyes hidden beneath brows gone white. "Reverend Mercer," August asked gently. The old man didn't react. Clara stepped forward and reached low, holding out the silver hairpin. "Do you remember this?" At first, Nothing. Then his fingers twitched. The moment his eyes found the pin, they changed, clouds parting. He reached out, slowly, like it was a candle in the dark. Lorna Callan, he murmured. She wore it the day she came to me. Said her daughter was missing. Said the orphanage wasn't what it seemed. Sylvie's breath caught. You tried to help? Clara asked, voice tight. He nodded once. I wrote letters. To the bishop. To the council. No one answered. Then came the fire. He looked at August now, more lucid than any of them expected. They said it was an accident. But I saw the oil drums, the padlocks on the dormitory doors. I tried to break one open. My hands still remember the heat. Sylvie stepped forward. Do you know my name? The Reverend blinked slowly. I remember your mother. Brave, too brave. She left you a name. Yes. He reached into a pouch at his side and drew out a brittle map, stained at the edges. This is the original land parcel the orphanage stood on. And here he pointed with a trembling hand. This ledger I copied before it burned. Names, all of them. Some crossed out. Some marked red. August took the sheet, among the faded ink. One name stood out. May Thorne. He stared. His throat closed. That was our girl's name. He whispered. The one Mabel carried. The one we lost before she could breathe. Mercer touched his shoulder. She's not lost. Not if you remember. The three of them sat in silence, the fire snapping between them. Outside, the sky darkened. The wind picked up. What should we do with this? Clara asked, holding the ledger like it was a sacred text. Bring it to light. Mercer said simply. The dead don't rest when truth lies buried. They thanked him and left a bundle of dried food and kindling near the hearth. As they rode back, Sylvie said nothing for a long time. Then she reached into her pocket and pressed something into August's hand. It was a drawing of the church, and inside, 3 figures, one holding fire, one with a book, one with a hand outstretched. We'll need this for the hearing, she said. August looked down at her, saw the fear in her face, but also the iron in her spine. We will, he said behind them. The forest closed in again, but the wind carried their scent forward now. Not back, toward justice, toward reckoning, toward a truth no fear could burn away. The town hall of Edge Hollow had never seen so many boots at once. Rows of wooden benches groaned beneath the weight of 100 curious, half-weary citizens. Sunlight filtered through high windows, casting long shadows across the dusty floorboards. The room smelled of sweat, dry tobacco, and the stale breath of secrets too long sealed. At the front sat the 3 Lucetta Vale. Vale pristine, lips fixed in a perfect arc. Deputy Ford, his badge freshly polished, boots shined like ceremony, and a lawyer from the county clean suit. Cleaner hands, across from them. On the other bench were August Thorne, Clara Hart, and a small girl with ash-blonde hair and steady eyes. Sylvie wore her best dress, one Clara had stitched in the quiet nights leading up to this day. Her shoes didn't match, but she stood like someone who had crossed fire and come out brighter. The mayor cleared his throat. This hearing has been called upon request from Miss Clara Hart, concerning events tied to the former Callan orphanage and the custody of one minor child. He looked over the room, nervously tapping a pencil. Let all speak with respect, and let what's buried be judged by the living. Lucetta was first to racy. She glided forward, like a dancer on polished boards. This child, Sylvie, is an unregistered minor, with no known guardianship. The men beside her, she nodded toward August and Clara, while no doubt well-meaning, have no legal claim. Deputy Ford has done his duty by attempting to place her in formal care. Any resistance, she added sweetly, has been emotional, not lawful. The lawyer stood next, adjusting his cuffs in support of Miss Vale's statement. We submit these documents. He handed over a neat file, paperwork stamped and signed. Guardianship approval filed in the name of a state institution, with Miss Vale as the registered trustee. Clara did not raise. She simply turned to Sylvie and whispered, "Now." Sylvie stepped forward. She carried with her not a statement, nor any official scroll, just a folded piece of thick paper. She opened it slowly, laying it before the mayor. It was a drawing. One side showed the old Tricallan orphanage, every window, every hallway. On the back, she had drawn a man with a star-shaped badge, lighting a match by a gas drum. And beside him, a woman with a bracelet bearing a red cross-like scar. There was no flourish, no need. Ford shifted in his seat, Lucetta's hands curled tight in her lap. The mayor leaned forward. "You drew this from memory." Sylvie nodded. Clara rose now. "I've brought a document too," she said, placing a handwritten copy on the table. "It's not the original Ledger M. That was taken. But this," she tapped the page, "is from memory, verified by surviving fragments." She looked toward the gallery. "These names are not inventions. They are children. Lost. Some adopted into saloons, some burned to life." Ford spoke up, voice taut. "This is slander. There is no proof." August stood. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he pulled from his coat a worn envelope, sealed with wax, now cracked at the edges. "This is from Reverend Mercer," he said, written in his own hand, just days ago. The mayor gestured. August passed it forward. "I knew one of those children," August said, voice low but steady. "She was supposed to come live with me and my wife. Her name was May. She never arrived. We were told it was a mistake, a clerical error." He looked straight at Lucetta now. "But it wasn't. Was it?" Lucetta smiled faintly, like she had practiced it in front of a mirror. The mayor opened the letter, read it silently. His lips moved with each word. Then, without comment, he passed it to the town clerk. And finally, back to Clara. The room had grown so quiet. The wind outside seemed loud by comparison. From the back, an old farmer stood. "I lost a niece in that fire," he said softly. "They told us it was the stove." Another voice followed. "They said all the records burned, but I always wondered why no funerals were held." Ford Reese, "You can't take the words of children and ghosts over sworn officers of the law." Sylvie turned then, walked up beside August, and took his hand. "Children remember what grown-ups forget," she said quietly. Her voice didn't tremble. It simply existed like a flame refusing to flicker. Lucetta finally rose, walking slowly to the center. "I have nothing to hide," she said. She extended her arm. The bracelet was gone, but the pale red scar beneath it remained cross-shaped, clear as the dawn. Gasps rippled across the benches. Lucetta's smile vanished. "I wore it for charity," she muttered, "for remembrance." The mayor spoke at last. "We will adjourn for review. All materials will be verified, and the Reverend may be called to testify if able." He stood, shoulders heavy. "But whatever the outcome, let it be known truth is no one's to bury. Not anymore." As people stood and filed out, some in silence, others whispering, Clara placed her hand on Sylvie's shoulder. August reached for both of them. Outside, the sun had finally broken through, and none of them looked back. The frost melted late that spring, as if the land itself had held its breath too long. Snow dripped from the eaves of Edge Hollow, and the air carried a softness it hadn't known in years. There were fewer whispers now. The town, bruised by truth, had stopped looking for explanations and started tending its wounds in quiet ways, repainting shutters, sweeping porches, and letting the past settle like dust where it belonged. Lucetta Vale was never seen again. Some said she boarded the early morning freight, her hat low, gloves tight, heading west toward places where no one knew her name. Others believed she never left town, only changed it, becoming a shadow behind curtains, haunting her own mistakes. Either way, she was gone. Deputy Ford had fewer places to go. The sheriff's badge was stripped from his chest, replaced by the silence of an empty cell and the cold press of official inquiry. He didn't confess, not in words. But the ledger and testimony, Mercer's letter, and Sylvie's drawing spoke louder than any courtroom plea. And sometimes, late at night, the townsfolk heard a voice in the jail call out, not in anger or defense, but something like regret. Reverend Mercer, meanwhile, was placed at his own request in the county sanatorium outside Winslow. The nurses said he liked the trees there, that he walked the gardens barefoot at dusk, whispering the names of the children he once buried only in memory. He ate full meals. He prayed aloud again. He said fear no longer lived in his bones. As for August, Clara, and Sylvie, they didn't leave. They stayed in the old house, where the stove now burned every night, and the windows wore clean linen curtains Clara had stitched by hand. The barn was swept. A new gate was built. There was laughter sometimes, too startling at first, then familiar. August stood taller these days, not because the weight had vanished, but because he no longer carried it alone. The porch had a second rocking chair now, and sometimes he sat in it just to listen birds, wind, or Sylvie humming while she read. Sylvie had a room now, not just a bed, a space with yellowed books, her own quilt, and a shelf with her drawings, the tray. The woman with a red scar, a house with smoke curling out the chimney, and a trio of figures holding hands beneath it. The official papers came in late May. He signed them at the general store, using Mabel's old fountain pen. No ceremony, no witnesses, just ink and resolve. When he walked out with Sylvie's hand in his, the sky broke open and let spring pour down like a blessing. "Papa," she whispered. It was the first time she said it. He didn't reply, his throat too tight, but he squeezed her hand. And she understood. Clara, meanwhile, began teaching again. The church reopened its back room for lessons. Children, orphans, drifters, sons and daughters of miners and millers, came with slates and nervous smiles. Clara brought books and apples and an upright piano someone had donated from a closed saloon. Sylvie sometimes sat in the back row, quiet but present. She helped sharpen pencils and draw maps in chalk. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was always something that made people pause and listen. One afternoon in early June, the three of them, August, Clara, and Sylvie, stood in front of the house with tools and nails and planks of cedar. They built a porch swing. Then they rebuilt the little shed where Mabel used to keep preserves. Then the chicken coop. Then a small wooden post with a lantern fixed to it right by the gate. The glass was clean, the oil fresh. It never went out. People began to notice. Children who wandered the hills sometimes came by for bread or stories. Travelers knocked to ask for directions and left with biscuits. A young widow once asked if Clara would teach her to read. Something had changed in the town's marrow, and no one could quite name it. But they all felt it. One Sunday evening, as pink light spilled across the sky like spilled rosewater, August sat on the steps with Clara beside him, and Sylvie stretched out between them, head resting in her lap, feet brushing his boot. They watched the lantern flicker on. "You think it'll hold?" Clara asked. August tilted his head. "The light," she nodded. "It's not about holding," he said. It's about staying. Sylvie shifted sleepily. Like us, August smiled, voice low. Like us. They didn't start as family, but they stayed as one. Years later, a young woman stepped off a dusty bus, pulling into Edge Hollow. She carried a camera, a sketchbook, and a small bracelet engraved with the name S. Thorny. It was Sylvie, now a traveling artist, a storyteller through in images, living and painting across the West. She had returned to the place where her life once turned, not to relive the pain, but to honor those who believed in her before she could believe in herself. The lantern by the old gate still burned. Another family lived there now, but they had kept the wooden post like a piece of the town's soul left untouched. At the local library, she held a small exhibition, sketches of Clara, of August, of the silver hairpin, of the fire, and of nameless stars marked in red from Ledger M. A young visitor asked, "Was this story real? Were there people like Mr. August?" She smiled. It was real. And if you haven't met someone like him yet, maybe it's because you're meant to become that person first.